Washington, D.C. back in 1928. That was almost 90 years ago. And this is 2017 in Charlottesville, Virginia. Led by white nationalist Richard Spencer, a large group carried torches and chanted, "You will not replace us." The march on Saturday was to protest plans to remove a Confederate monument to General Robert E. Lee. On Sunday, the mayor of Charlottesville took part in a counter demonstration.
What a lot of this, the alt-right and these extremists who are trafficking in this kind of theatrics want is more oxygen. So I really want to deny them that oxygen.
The Reverend Jimmie Hawkins is director for the Presbyterian Church's Office of Public Witness. Today, he and a group of black clergy members held an event here in the nation's capital to discuss the Trump administration and how its policies are impacting the community. First, I'd like to thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
You're from Durham,
North Carolina.
Well, what'd you make of those demonstrations down in Charlottesville?
Well, I think it's indicative of the current environment in the country today. We're so split, not only economically and through issues of class, but also through issues of race. And so I think that right now we've got to deal with these issues very soon. You know,
I've got some conservative friends.
Mm-hmm.
You know, might be white and may have some disagreements with others on the issues, but they wouldn't take part in a march like that. I mean, that's beyond the pale. You know, that's beyond disagreements,
yes.
Conservative versus liberal.
Yeah.
That's white supremacist stuff.
Yes, exactly. It really is, and I think that to use the term white supremacy today is not in vogue anymore. So they won't say they're white supremacists, but when you look at the issues they put forth and match it up with white supremacy, they go hand in hand.
Right. You're in Washington to protest some of the president's policies, is that correct?
Yes.
What specifically is Donald Trump doing that bothers you?
Well, you can take his latest effort with the AHCA bill that he has supported, that the House of Representatives put forth. We think it's going to be damaging to the life of this country. We think that it's going, the estimates are that over 24 million people will lose health care because of it. And yet the president is saying that this is a good bill alongside Paul Ryan. We think that this is the wrong direction for the country to go in.
Are you then trying to send a message to the Senate, which is going to take this bill? And a lot of people say it won't even resemble itself once the Senate is finished with it. So are you protesting what the House did, but also trying to send a message to the Senate? What's going on here?
All of that, because I think right now the Senate is showing a lot more wisdom than they did in the House. I like the way they're saying they're going to stop and study the situation. They're not going to necessarily take the House of Representatives bill and just pass it. I think that they're taking this issue a lot more seriously than the president is.
The president said back during the campaign to African Americans in particular, what have you got to lose? How would you respond to that?
Well, that's really what prompted our press conference today. We're answering the president's question. What do we have to lose? We're going to lose on every front right now. When you look at this budget, many of the programs that are cut right now assist not only poor African Americans, but poor people throughout this country. You look at education, he passed an executive order for HBCUs, but there's no meat behind it because these executive orders basically mean nothing. When you look at almost every area of his policies, especially with Jeff Sessions and all of the things that he is doing to say that we're going to keep people in jail longer, going to put harsher sentencing for drug use.
Mandatory minimum sentencing back, yeah.
Yeah, and I agree with former Eric Holder. It's a dumb idea. And even Republicans and Democrats say that it's time to move and look forward for some new ideas.
And a lot of judges opposed mandatory minimum sentences because it took them out of the process of weighing all of the instances and information.
And you look at the fact that people can get 25 years for just because it's their third strike. It makes no sense whatsoever.
All right, so if you had a chance to sit down with President Trump, what would you say to him? If you had a minute to talk to him, what would you say to him? What would your appeal be?
Well, I would say to the president, get a wider variety of advisors. I think he needs people from both sides. He needs people who will at times challenge him and not necessarily just kind of nod their head at what he decides to do. He needs some individuals with some wisdom because right now, many of the decisions that he makes, they're very rash and they're thrown out there through a tweet and they cause such an uproar throughout the country.
Well, what would you say to people who say, well, you know, this is just more of the rewards and punishments of the political process? African Americans didn't vote for Donald Trump in big numbers. So why should he do an about face, turn his back in some instances on those who did put him in office, and cater to some of the concerns of African Americans? How would you respond to that?
I would say there are two things. One, many of his policies are going to hurt the people who voted for him. Many working class white Americans who voted for Donald Trump are going to be hurt by his policies when they lose their health care. And also, What impacts African Americans impacts everyone in this country. Donald Trump is no longer the president of just his constituents who voted for him. He is president of the United States.
Okay, thanks for coming in.
Yes.
Appreciate it. Good talking to you. All right,
Thank you.
going to be back in a minute. Stay